Welcome everyone here. This is a People's Museum, and I want you to make the distinction from a corporate museum, and not to cast anything on anyone. Downtown is a corporate museum, and that means you're owned by the people that don't mean us any good. Everyone who works in this museum is volunteer. It would developed by volunteers, and everyone here volunteers. We accept no grants because we think that's a dirty word and the moment for control. We welcome everybody here. We're open 6 days a week, and this is part of the heart of this community. Welcome, and we appreciate to have David here and come here and give his good Baptist talk. And get us to run. Dave?
All right, thank you. Thank you. Dylan?
Yeah, if everyone doesn't mind, I'm going to read David's bio for you really quick. I'm Dylan Hock. I volunteer here at the museum, and I've helped to coordinate this event. Thank you for coming. I also want to thank Dr. Jackson and the museum for having us. David Cobb is a National Projects Director of Democracy Unlimited. He is a lawyer and a political activist. David has sued corporate polluters, lobbied elected officials, run for political office himself, and has been arrested for nonviolent civil disobedience.
All right now.
He truly believes we must all misuse all the tools in the toolbox to effect the systemic social change we so desperately need. David was born in San Leon, Texas, and worked as a laborer before going to college. He graduated from the University of Houston Law School in 1993 and maintained successful private law practice in Houston for several years before devoting himself to full-time activism to achieve real democracy in the United States. In 2002, David ran for Attorney General of Texas, pledging to use the office to revoke the charters of corporations that repeatedly violate health, safety, and environmental laws. He did not win the office, but the Green Party of Texas grew dramatically during his campaign from 4 local chapters to 26. In 2004, he ran for President of the United States on the Green Party ticket and successfully campaigned for the Ohio recount. Ladies and gentlemen, David Cobb.
All right. Thank you, Dylan. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, because we're in a museum, I want to make sure that we commit ourselves to telling the truth, right?
All right.
And especially because of the welcome that we got from Dr. Jackson, who made it a specific point to acknowledge that this is a people's museum, as opposed to a corporate museum. You know, most people would not even make that distinction, much less a curator, right? So honestly, and I'm not fronting when I tell you, I feel a special level of camaraderie and comradeship with Dr. Jackson, and I also feel an even heightened sense of responsibility tonight because of where we are. Because you see, yeah, you can applaud that. The Freedom Party and the Association of Genuine Independent Electoral Politics that this place represents, and the legacy that it comes out of. I honor that legacy. I aspire to try to help to recreate that movement now. You see, because friends, we don't need policies, we need a movement.
Yes, sir.
Right? We need to actually take ourselves seriously. Yes, we've got to do study and we've got to do educating. We've got to educate each other. I hope I might share some information with you that you find helpful. I hope you might educate me. But really, when we get down to it, if we simply educate ourselves so that we can be good Trivial Pursuit players, we have not really done much, have we?
Right.
Frankly, what I'm getting at is, friends, what we need to do is to learn an analysis that will then take us into action. Right? And so I take my job today to persuade you to join a movement that can actually change the country that we live in. And because I want to be persuasive, I want to share with you something that I knew intuitively when I was a trial lawyer, and now science is proving beyond a shadow of a doubt, and that's this. If you want to be persuasive, facts don't really matter so much.
No.
Man, the first time I heard it said that way, I thought, that's terrible. Right? I mean, like many of you, I put a lot of time and effort into learning facts. And we sort of think that if you can just learn to present facts logically, that everybody will see what we see and somehow change will magically happen. Then I came across the work of a fellow named George Lakoff. I see a couple of you know that name. George Lakoff is a cognitive scientist, and he has studied how human beings process information. And what he has discovered and then written about is that we as human beings do not understand the world merely through facts and the application of logic. Yes, there's a role for that, but deeper still, says George Lakoff, we as human beings understand the world through the stories we tell each other. And the stories that are told over and over again become the narrative or the cultural reference point or the frame by which we see the world. And then anytime you're presented with a new fact, and I don't mean just you if you're a leftist or a conservative or black or white or Latino, I mean human beings, when presented with new information, will process that information in light of whatever story they already understand about how the world basically operates, right? And so if you're going to present that new fact, you better present it in a way that people can understand it. And so, since I want to be persuasive, and because I know that human beings process new information according to a story, I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to tell a story on how it came to be that these huge transnational corporations are not just exercising power. I'm going to tell a story on how it came to be that these huge transnational corporations are ruling us. As surely as masters once ruled slaves, as surely as kings once ruled subjects, unelected and unaccountable corporate CEOs are ruling us in this country because they're making the decisions. That's what ruling means. Corporate CEOs already decided how much poison is going to be in the water that we're all drinking. Corporate CEOs decided how much toxins will be in the air that we're all breathing. Corporate CEOs are deciding whether you get health care or not. Corporate CEOs decide whether this country goes to war. And we, the people, we get to choose between Coke or Pepsi. We get to choose between paper or plastic at the grocery store line. You can have 17 types of toothpaste to choose from, if you can pay for it, by the way. Let's put a note there to acknowledge that in this society, if you can't pay for something, even if there's a consumer choice for it, you don't get it. It's not about what your needs are, it's about whether you can pay for it, right? But the point I'm making is, I'm not against consumer choices. I'm glad that there are consumer choices. But I do not mistake a consumer choice with political power. See, political power would be actually meaningfully participating in how our society operates. It would be helping to shape public policy. It would be participating in the institutions in which we live, not just selecting from prepackaged choices that are presented to us. That's what political power would really mean, right? So the story I'm going to tell is, how did we get to this state? And as I tell this story, I'm going to challenge you to challenge me to ask, is this a story that only liberals or progressives can hear? Or has David Cobb and the Move to Ammend effort figured out a way to tell a story that cuts across typical political parties and political ideologies? Is this a story that actually speaks to us as human beings and actually is something that we can see being a movement that's broad enough, deep enough, powerful enough to actually change the country? And as I tell this story, I want to be clear that I'm going to tell or associate 4 particular concepts as we tell this story. The first concept is the word democracy. That word gets tossed around a lot in this country, so let's make sure we've got some common ground. Anybody know from what language the word democracy derives?
Greek.
It's Greek. Very good. Let's break it down. Demos means the people. Kratia means, anybody know? It means rule or power. So literally translated, the word democracy means the people rule. Pop quiz. How many of y'all believe we the people are ruling in the United States? Don't be shy. Look around. Look around. I'm serious. Just look around here at this wonderful People's Museum. Not a single hand went up in the air. I do this presentation all across the country. By the end of this year, I'm on target to have done 175 presentations like this all across the country. I ask this question everywhere I go. Almost nobody raises their hands. That's a problem. But saying it another way, I think it's a good thing. What? Oh, no. It's not a good thing that we the people are not ruling in the United States. I submit to you that it's a good thing that nobody's raising their hands to that question anymore. I tell you it's a good thing that we're finally being courageous enough to actually tell the damn truth. That notwithstanding what we were taught as children, we don't have a democracy where the people rule. In fact, to keep it to the Greek language, we have a plutocracy, the rule by a wealthy elite. And frankly, I feel like we might need to make up a whole other word, y'all. Let's call it the kleptocracy. The rule by a thieving wealthy elite. Because you know what? They are stealing from us. They are stealing our labor. They are stealing our resources. And what really gets me angry, they are stealing our future and our children's future.
That's right.
And that's what's happening right now. So I think it's good that we are finally being willing to tell the truth about the creation myth that we were taught in this country about how the society actually works. Because, you know what, I got to tell you, there's an old adage where I'm from. I'm originally from Texas, for which I am trying to make amends. But we say where I'm from, the truth will set you free. But first, it will often piss you off. And I think that what we have to do is actually come to terms with the fact that much of what we were told has been a creation myth. And you see, it's a myth that is actually very effective because, you see, people want to live in liberty, justice, and equality. Right? They tell that myth for a reason. It's to confuse us, right? And to make us actually feel good about it. And I want to tell you something, my friends. I'll tell you that children want and deserve liberty, justice, and equality. And you know what? It's not because they're American children. It's because they're human beings.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, absolutely, American children want and deserve liberty, justice, and equality. And so do Iraqi children.
That's right.
And Israeli children, and Syrian children, and Nigerian children, and Mexican children. You see, here's the thing. That creation myth around liberty, justice, and equality that we were taught, those aren't American values. Those are human values. And so if we're really going to actually build a movement that's strong enough and powerful enough to actually change the world in which we live, we're going to have to tell the truth about what that means, and we're going to have to embrace the fact that really what we're talking about is a human rights movement. Are y'all with me? A human rights movement. So that's actually what we're looking for these days. And that's going to bring me to my next concept. Like I said, I want to be transparent about where I'm coming from. The next word on the board is sovereignty. Friends, if I just had the word the sovereign on the board, who or what would you think of if I just said the sovereign? Queen, king. I bet many of you, that's the word that you thought of, right? That's because the word sovereignty means the authority to rule. And 500 years ago, at least in the European tradition, the sovereign was the king. The king was the sovereign. Those words were literally synonymous. And where, by the way, did the king claim his authority to rule? God. You don't get more legitimate. Right? I mean, if I could stand before you and tell you that I'm here to tell you what to do because God told me to, and you believe it, that's power. And to illustrate that, we're going to do a quick little exercise. This exercise is always a lot of fun for me. You'll see. I will invite those of you here in this People's Museum to indulge me. Close your eyes for a moment and repeat after me. David Cobb is the king. I told y'all this was fun for me, but I didn't get any of you. Let me try a different one. Because David is God's representative on earth.
Whoa.
There's something in the water in Muskegon. How about this last one? And therefore, anything David tells me to do, I will obey without question. Okay. Now, normally, folks, this is where I would say open your eyes. But to your credit, Muskegon, ain't nobody's eyes closed in this crowd. Good on you. But I will tell you this. Y'all did what every group does. As soon as you realized what I was asking you to do, you all laughed at it. You notice that? I mean, some of you snickered and chuckled, but everybody basically laughed. And you know why you laughed? Because it's funny. And not funny like, oh, David has just made a very witty and droll comment funny. Funny like absurd funny. Right? I mean, and like the idea that I could tell this fella how to live his life because who my daddy is, that's ridiculous. Even better that I get to tell all of you, in fact, how all of society will be organized and operated because of the divine right of kings. That is absurd. Of course you laugh at that. And folks, 500 years ago, people just like you not only thought it, but believed it. See, I'm asking you to take a moment. a somber and sober moment to recognize that today we can't even talk about monarchy in any real, meaningful way. Like the divine right of kings is just ridiculous, right? 500 years ago, that was cultural, legal, political reality. And everybody knew it was true. Another way to say it, my friends, change happened. And I don't mean just changes around the margin. I mean something deep. I mean something about reality itself changed. Because now, y'all hold on, because the Texan going to get metaphysical on y'all. You ready? We are all individually participating in creating our shared collective reality right now. A simpler way to say that is, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true,
It is true.
it becomes true. And so, friends, if it is true that the United States of America is fundamentally racist, sexist, and class oppressive, and that is true, and if it is true that the huge transnational corporations are ruling us, and that is true, and if it is true that these huge corporations are actually destroying the planet that we depend upon for life itself, and that is true. See, if these things are true, I suggest we need to start thinking and acting differently than we have. We need to start thinking and acting like we're in a crisis. You know why I think we ought to start thinking and acting like we're in a crisis? Because we're in a crisis, y'all. I mean, we got to tell the truth. This is a crisis. There is an ecological crisis happening right now. The global climate is changing before our very eyes. The collapse of the fish stocks. I mean, you look in any particular way, and we are seeing that the way industrial corporate capitalism is operating on this planet, it is literally destroying the planet that we depend upon for life itself. That is happening. And it's also an economic crisis, right? And by the way, capitalism can't solve this crisis because capitalism is this crisis. Right? The current notion of austerity and what they're trying to actually push down our throats, that's late-stage corporate capitalism. Make no mistake that there is a difference between a market economy and corporate capitalism as it's currently operating. We've again been bamboozled to think that the only way you can do commerce is if it's fundamentally exploitive and oppressive. That's another lie that they teach us, right? I mean, independent merchants are the only things keeping this country even going today, and it's not because of policies that are helping them. Most governmental policies are actually got their boot on the neck of the small independent business person, and all the policies are actually trying to help these huge transnational corporations that are working their tails off to export jobs, export production out of this country, right? That's reality. So I think that we need to start telling the crisis that we're in, but I also don't want people to get too upset about this, friends, because let's remember that in the Chinese language, the word for crisis is also another word. What is that?
Opportunity.
Louder, sir.
Opportunity.
Opportunity. In the Chinese language, they use symbols for words. The symbol for crisis is literally the same exact symbol for opportunity. Because what they know, and what you know if you really think about it, when you are confronted with the crisis, it gives you the opportunity to make big changes. And I don't mean tinkering at the margins changes. I mean the big kind of changes that we need. So friends, just take a deep breath, because you know what? You are blessed and cursed to be living on the planet Earth at this particular point in human history. Because what we do over the next, I'd say from now to literally 15, 20 years, is going to actually determine whether or not we actually have a future for our children and grandchildren. It's just that serious, right? And I want to just ask, just a quick check-in. Does it sound like I'm telling the truth so far?
Yeah.
Right? So this is the thing. That this is actually what we know is going on, but almost nobody actually says this in public places, and the current system, political, economic, social systems, try to punish us when we really tell the truth. So I'm going to suggest to you that just try it a little bit. Try telling the absolute truth about racism and sexism and classism, and just start to have that experience of truth-telling, and you know what? It will liberate you. It really does. It frees you up to not have to, well, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Look, I'd say this. Try to speak your truth as clearly and eloquently as you can, in a way that people can understand it, but please, let's stop censoring ourselves, right? I mean, let's just tell the truth to one another so we can figure out what it is that we need to do. And friends, that's going to bring me to the next topic, which is legal personhood. Please note I did not write corporate personhood on the board, right? But legal personhood, that's because this concept means the ability to assert rights. And since we're talking about legal personhood, we need the ability to assert rights under law. And saying it this way, I hope you see that this is not just a legal technicality. This notion of legal personhood is not something that only lawyers should concern themselves with, because you see, friends, the question of who gets to actually be a person under law has been one of the fundamental struggles in this country from jump. That's been actually at the core of every social movement fight for justice and equality in this country has been about who gets to claim to be a person. And I'm talking about from the American Revolution to the abolitionist movement, to the women's suffrage movement, to the trade union movement, to the civil rights movement. Legal personhood matters. And there's a reason that the corporatists are trying to seize that word from us. And the last topic on the board, at least for now, is the corporation. Friends, from what language does the word corporation derive? Latin, very good. Corpus means body, and the suffix tion means simply to have or create. So if you translate this word, it means to have or create body. And by body, I mean literally physical body, right? That's because in law school we are taught, and by the way, are there any lawyers in the crowd besides me that would admit it? Oh, hell. You see that? You see what it is? Hey, sister, it's a friendly crowd. We in good shape. So I'm going to ask you, my sister at the bar, do you remember being taught in law school that a corporation is a legal fiction?
Yes.
Absolutely. I do this presentation everywhere. There's always at least one, oftentimes many lawyers. Every lawyer remembers that, right? And watch this. Even for those of you who were not subjected to 3 years of the law school experience, if you've heard that phrase, even if you couldn't precisely define it, but if you've heard that a corporation is a legal fiction, raise your hand. For real. Look at all those hands go up, right? So corporation is legal fiction. Corporation is legal fiction. A corporation is legal fiction. Friends, if a corporation is a legal fiction, that begs the question, what does the word fiction mean? Not real? Untrue? Made up? See, in law school, I remember, sister, my first day in corporations class, the professor said, you have to understand a corporation doesn't exist in the physical material world. You know, reality doesn't actually exist that way. But the professor, she told us, yeah, we're going to pretend like this group of people and the materials and the resources and the money and the contractual obligations and the cultural assumptions, a very complex, rich, deep concept. We're going to pretend like it's one thing so that we can treat it a certain way under law. And see, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it becomes true. Friends, a corporation is a construct. It is constructed culturally and socially and given meaning through our legal system because we all decide to do it. That's really important. A corporation is whatever it is that we in society say it is and nothing more.
Right. It's our courts rule it's a person.
How about that? We'll get there.
Oh,
Stay with me. No, let's go. No. We'll get there. But the point I'm making here is that the word corporation, see, it comes from Latin because the first corporations ever created by clever, genius human beings were created during the Roman Republic. Not, by the way, during the Roman Empire. And sometimes I wish we'd spend some time asking, what happens when a republic devolves into an empire? Because that might be an important conversation in the United States of America. Think about that one. But here's the thing. Those Romans, they created the corporation for a reason. For example, who here has said, all roads lead to Rome? It's 2,000 years later. You've either heard it or said it, right? Check it out. That elaborate road system was built and maintained as a corporation. Likewise, the aqueduct system, that amazing bit of technology that moved water all across the Italian peninsula without electricity. Quick time out. See how clever human beings are? See why I'm so optimistic? Because I know we are smart. Humans are clever. Like, in fact, I don't think there's probably a problem that you could give me that I can't give you the answer to if you give me about 30 minutes and access to the internet. Yeah, see, I'm not saying I'm smart enough to know all the answers. I don't. I'm telling you right now. But if you let me have access to the internet, I'll find somebody who's figured it out. And actually, I'll find a group of people working collectively, cooperatively together who have figured out actually the problem. See, we don't actually have technological problems that don't have solutions anymore. There are solutions to almost every problem that we are facing. Our problems today are political and cultural. We don't have the political power. We have not designed the structures to actually implement solutions that exist. And that's a fact. Oh, and by the way, that aqueduct system, can you guess? It was a corporation. Likewise, the first universities, the first hospitals, want to guess? Corporation, corporation. So a pop quiz. What does a road system, a water system, a university, a hospital, what do those all have in common? Thank you so much, Paul. Everything I just described serves the people. Everything I just described was a public process or public project. See, the genius of the original corporation, the idea was to provide a mechanism under law to allow private property, resources, and so forth to be accumulated to do some public thing. It was a public-private partnership, if you will. So saying it this way, I hope it's clear, I'm not anti-corporation. I'm not pro-corporation either, because that doesn't make any sense. A corporation is just a tool. It's a construct, right? Like say, sir, what's your first name?
Roger.
Roger. May I use you as an example, Roger, for a moment? All right, I want to imagine, Roger, that you and I are friends, and it's a hot summer day here. I know in the summers it can get hot, right? So you can imagine it's a hot day, and I happen to be slicing some tomatoes, and Roger comes by and says, David, what are you doing? I said, I'm making some gazpacho soup, Roger, and I want to share it with you. Now, question, is that a good knife or a bad knife? Well, it's a good knife, right? Here I am making a soup. I'm going to share it with my new friend Roger. Now, Roger, I want you to imagine the same hot summer day. You come over. You say, David, what are you doing? And I say, ah! And I take my knife and I put it up against your throat. Is that knife good or bad? That's right. Roger figured it out. It's a trick question. The knife is neither good nor bad, is it?
Right.
Exactly. Now, what's really at stake is the knife is a tool, right? In scenario one, it is being put to a productive, effective purpose, right? In the second scenario, it's put to a homicidal purpose. I submit this to you. The corporations today are simply tools, and they could be put to phenomenal, productive purposes. Right. I'd be willing to bet you that this here People's Museum is probably incorporated. Am I right? Right. See? Would anybody, certainly not me, would say that this entity was a bad thing. In fact, it's a good thing. Right? And I'm honored to be allowed here to be sharing my information with you in this corporation. Right? But we also know that there are corporations out there that are killing people. We know that there are corporations out there that are profiting from imprisoning people. Mostly poor people and people of color, by the way. Right? We know that there's all sorts of ways that this corporate tool is being used ineffectively. That's the point I'm getting at. We've got to break out of this idea that corporations are the problem. The problem is a social, political, economic, and legal system that's allowing these oppressive, racist, sexist, and class oppressive systems to operate. Our problem is not merely the corporation. It's not the right way to think about it. And so, now that I've laid it out this way, I want to also point out that this idea of just doing public good is not exactly how the modern transnational corporation operates, is it? No. That's because this modern transnational corporation, it actually comes out of the 14th and 15th century of Europe. You know, the age of discovery. I have to put discovery in quotation marks because, honestly, in my junior high and high school class, that's actually what it was called. The age of discovery, the 14th and 15th century. And after all, what did the Europeans discover in the 14th and 15th century?
It wasn't America.
Africa, Asia, later what became known as North and South America. Newsflash. There were people living there.
Yeah.
Right.
They weren't lost.
That's right.
Ain't nobody lost. There was no discovery. So in the same spirit of courageous truth-telling, let's tell the truth. That's actually the age of rape and pillage and plunder and murder. There's one word that sums that up for me, and that's called empire. See, that's the age of empire. European empire, where they literally went out to destroy other people and steal their resources. And get this, the modern transnational corporation that we understand, it didn't just accidentally get created during the age of empire. It got created as an intentional, deliberate instrument of empire. In fact, one of the most early of those corporations, they were called joint stock companies. One of the earliest joint stock companies was called the East India Company, literally designed to militarily conquer the entire subcontinent of India. And not only that, but to destroy their existing civilization and institutions so that they could force those people to work in slave conditions to steal the resources from their own land so that that wealth and resource could be sent to the shareholders of the East India Joint Stock Company. It was a business model based on empire. Here's another of the early joint stock companies, the Africa Trading Company. Anybody want to guess what the Africa Trading Company traded?
Slaves.
You know what, I'm going to use myself as an example because I think that we don't talk about race often enough in this country, and I don't think white people bring up race and talk about race honestly enough in this country. So I'm going to put myself on the spot and do it. And I'm going to do it in a way that is honestly a little bit embarrassing, but I do it because it needs to be done. And I'm going to tell you this. If I were asked the question, what did the Africa Trading Company trade, and I wasn't really paying close attention, I was being sort of casual, the reaction that would just blurt out of my head, slaves. After all, I was born in this country, right? I was educated in this country. I was taught about how horrible the Africa slave trade was. I was taught about Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth as runaway slaves who helped other slaves run away. See, I tell you, that word pops into my head not because I think I'm a bad person. I'm not a bad person. In fact, I'm a good person. But I'm also a person who was born and educated in this culture. And the story that I've been told over and over again is to think about the horror that was slavery, but to really understand the Africans as slaves. But now that I've made a big deal about that, let me ask this question. In the 14th and 15th century, when the Africa Trading Company was operating, was Africa populated by slaves?
No, sir.
No. Africa was populated by
Free
people. Africa was populated by people. And now, to really go out there and have an honest conversation, Africa was populated by people who were basically just like me. Now, I say that with some trepidation because I'm not stupid. I know what skin color I have. But I say it with conviction because if you ask any scientist, if you ask any biologist, they will tell you race doesn't even exist. I mean, yes, there's differences in pigment, but you know what? There's differences in hair color too. Well, for those of you who have the hair, but you get my point.
That's right.
There's differences in eye color. There's differences in facial features. I mean, there are trivial genetic differences between Homo sapiens, but race doesn't even exist. But check this out. Racism damn sure does.
Sure does.
Oh, wait, how can that be? Oh, yes, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true. So here's the thing, friends. Race is a construct as surely as the corporation is a construct. And what I'm trying to get to you here is, see, just like the corporation was created for a reason, race was created for a reason. And it wasn't merely to justify the enslavement of people from the African continent. Oh no, slavery had pre-existed that. But you know what's unique about the creation of race? The creation of whiteness? Because let's go deep here for a moment.
Right.
Whiteness is very new as a concept. See, yes, like how many people here, like me, can actually trace your ancestry or heritage to either the Scotch or the Irish? I'm both. Anybody in the crowd? There always are. Congratulations, we're recently white. No joke. I'm not joking. Has anybody read a book called How the Irish Became White? I recommend it. If you really want to understand the creation of whiteness as a concept and why, that book. But I'm going to do it in one sentence. I won't do it justice. It took a whole book, but let me do it in one sentence. Whiteness got created to bamboozle white people. And it goes like this. If you're poor and working class and the boss man's boot is on your neck, you say, this is terrible. I'm being exploited and oppressed. I hate this system. Oh, but at least I'm white. See, whiteness got created to actually fool working class people of my pigment to think that somehow I'm different and better than the other people with darker pigment that are getting exploited. But let me tell you something. White people that are in the crowd, Like, look, I want to be clear. White privilege exists, and we can talk about that, and we should deconstruct that. There's no doubt about that. But I'll tell you, it only goes so far. Because if you think your white skin is going to get you into a country club,
Hello.
just try to show up without money.
Hello.
You feel me? I'm just pointing out that this is a very complex idea. All I'm getting at, my friends, is that we have to understand that the corporation was created to exploit and oppress. Racism got created to justify exploitation and oppression. The point I'm making is corporatism, imperialism, and racism are inextricably linked. And what links them? Exploitation and oppression. So if we're really going to be serious about the work that needs to be done in this society and in this country, we're going to have to fairly and squarely address not only the history, but also say we need to create new institutions that are not exploitive, that are not oppressive. We actually need to commit ourselves to peace, justice, democracy, and ecological sustainability for everyone.
Yes, sir.
You with me?
Yes, sir.
Right? We can do this. All right. So, those are my basic concepts, but remember, I'm telling a story, right? So to bring this story up to the United States, let me ask this. How many colonies in the founding of the United States of America? Come on, y'all. This is an easy one. Everybody knows. 13, right? So since that was so easy, let me ask this question. Of those 13 colonies, how many of them were corporations?
13.
All of them. Yeah, y'all are too. That was supposed to be a trick question, but several of you got it. All of them, because remember, the word corporation means to have or create. Well, I'm here to tell you that the king created Massachusetts and every one of those original colonies. Now, somebody might be saying, that's ridiculous. Massachusetts was already here, but that's why it's a trick question. The land was here.
Right.
The people who lived on the land, and the rivers and the stream and the forest, reality was already here, but it took the king to create Massachusetts. And the king created Massachusetts by the use of a very specific legal instrument. Does anybody know the name of that legal instrument?
Charter.
Nicely done. A charter. The king creates Massachusetts by the use of a charter. And to illustrate that, we'll do another little exercise. In this exercise, I'll be the king. Why do y'all think I get to be the king in this exercise?
Because you got the marker.
Because I'm telling the story, right? See how important stories are? See how important it is that we ask who's telling these stories? Because I'll tell you something, my friends. The stories that are being told today are being told by a very small elite. And those stories are bamboozling us. They're confusing us. They're plenty willing to tell us the truth about sports and celebrities. But they will not tell us the truth about what's going on in this society. That's something we ought to think about. But I'm going to just do my little story. I'll be the king. I'm going to create Massachusetts. But I'm not going to bother with the day-to-day affairs of administering Massachusetts. I'm the king. I've got other people to exploit. So instead, I will create a royal governor. This is a new concept. The royal governor. And here's how it works. I, the king, create Massachusetts. I assign a royal governor and assign that royal governor with the legal duty. And now I'm going to quote from the actual charter of Massachusetts. The royal governor has the legal duty, quote, to plant, to rule, and to govern this new area on behalf of me, the king, to benefit me, the king, but also to benefit the other shareholders of the joint stock company known as the Massachusetts Bay Trading Company. Massachusetts began as a for-profit corporation on the same business model as the East India Company. So too was Rhode Island, the Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. Virginia began as the Virginia Company. Georgia, one of the original 13 colonies, began as a penal colony. Anybody want to guess what skin color the original servants and basic slaves who had to work the Georgia Penal Corporation, what skin did they have?
White.
White! See what I mean about white people being bamboozled through all of this?
White people are stupid.
We got a lot to unlearn. I don't think that white people are stupid. I think, though, that we have been just as confused as almost everybody else. So there's a lot of unlearning to do. See, it's not just that we're uneducated in this system, we're miseducated in this system. Right? So I would ask you that whether it's to me or anybody else that you come into contact with, let's try to be patient with one another. I don't reckon that most folks are stupid. I think that there are some people, though, who are just more confused than others.
Yeah.
You feel me? And so our job ought to be to help to clarify things, to get some understanding and to get some shared understanding. Now, if anybody, and let's just be honest, some of these white Tea Party people who are so dedicated to their own, not just ignorance, but to things that are just patently false, that's where the stupidity comes. When you've actually gotten an opportunity to actually learn something, and you say, "Oh no, I'm gonna hold on to this wrong information because who knows what psychological, emotional thing is going on there." That's what I'd call stupid. You know what I'm saying? But here's the thing. In our modern times, we wouldn't call such a person a royal governor, would we? What word would we use to describe this person?
President.
How about a CEO, or the president of the corporation, right? Think about it this way, friends. The American Revolution was not just a rejection of monarchy as a form of rule. It was also a people's uprising against corporate rule. Right. The Boston Tea Party was actually an act of nonviolent civil disobedience where a bunch of folks got together and threw the tea in the harbor, specifically targeting one corporation because of its malfeasance and its ties illegitimately to government. In fact, that night, only one company's tea got thrown in the... Not all the tea in the harbor was thrown in the harbor. You know whose tea got thrown in the harbor? The East India Company, and the East India Company alone. In fact, I wish that the current folks who call themselves Tea Party patriots would do just one more dig at history. Take one more pass and recognize that what they're celebrating is actually people's nonviolent civil disobedience. Right on, Tea Party! But here's something else. We have to acknowledge this, that it doesn't just end there. But I want to make it clear that there was, in fact, an American Revolution, and in case you're wondering, the American revolutionaries won. And when a revolution happens and you win, you get to write a new charter. And so in the United States, a new document gets written. This document is supposed to be the supreme law of the land. It's the document that's supposed to govern how we operate. What's that document called?
Constitution.
The U.S. Constitution. I knew my lawyer colleague would know. The U.S. Constitution. Folks, how many here have read the Constitution for real? You better raise your hand. All right, good. So when you read that document in its entirety, the Constitution actually describes two actors, right? And I mean, you read it in its entirety so that, as my mama said, son, if you want to understand something, you have to understand how it relates to itself and other things. You have to understand systems. If you just know individual facts, then you just know trivia. But if you know how things work and how they relate to other things, then you have knowledge. So I want to give you my understanding of how the Constitution actually is supposed to operate. The first actor in the Constitution is powerful. In fact, it's the first three words. We the people. We the people. Those are hallowed words in this country, and they should be. We the people come together to create the second actor, which is government itself. Now, friends, I want to take a moment to stop and say, saying it this way, we the people create government. In fact, I like how some of my anarchist friends say it. In this system, we the people should never be afraid of the government. Actually, they say government should be afraid of the people. Pop quiz. How many of y'all believe the government is afraid of we the people? It's a slow burn, right? Roger, Dylan, a couple of others. See my point? Yeah, you do too, right? You feel it? Here's the thing. If the government wasn't afraid of we the people, let me give you one word and we'll flesh out this one word, but I'm going to say one word to prove my point. Occupy. Right? If the government was not afraid of we the people, then why did they work so hard to delegitimize and ultimately disrupt and destroy Occupy encampments across this country? Because you know what? I had the privilege of traveling around. I probably went to 40 or 50 Occupy encampments offering teach-ins where I went. And I would never dare to speak for Occupy, but I happily collaborate with Occupy. And I can tell you there was all sorts of problems at Occupy encampments, to be sure. I've got to critique. But before I offer any critique, let me lift them up and say they did something I've been trying to do for 25 years. They sparked a movement for economic democracy in this country. They sparked a conversation about income inequality in this country. They did something that I honor them for doing. And you know how they did it? They occupied public space and started to talk to each other. That's all that was happening there, was honest conversation. Only the difference is they weren't talking about sports. They weren't talking about celebrity culture. They were actually talking about what matters. They were saying, why is it that 1% controls 99% of it? They were asking, why does the Federal Reserve get to actually control the money supply in the United States of America? See, they were having real conversations, and that scared the ruling elite, government, and corporate America. And you know what? I wish I could get the opportunity to have a conversation with any of these folks that are so scared of we the people. You know what I'd like to tell them? For real. I would say, don't be scared. There ain't nothing to be scared of, because you know what? We're actually a peaceful movement. And actually, even though you're so addicted to power right now that you can't see how good it is going to be when we actually win, your grandchildren are going to be grateful that we staged a intervention on your sick ass. Thanks, William. We'll be in touch. Right? Because that's what we need, is an intervention. Because let me tell you something. These wealthy elite, they are addicted to power like any crack addict is addicted to that pipe. They are so focused on it that they can't even see reality anymore. Right? And so, here's the thing. The movement that we need to build is one that actually has to be peaceful, it has to be just, it has to be democratic. Now let me be clear, that does mean that there's got to be some truth and reconciliation done, but at the end of the day, I want to actually help to provide some education for folks. And these rich folks, at the very least, maybe what we ought to do is take them outside. Let them walk in the forest, maybe. Walk through some folks, and then take them through a reality tour and see how children are having to live in the inner city, in Detroit, for example. Right? Let them actually have to experience what other human beings are living like because of the social, political, and economic institutions that they have created. And if they're not able to actually see the light, well, then we'll figure something out for them. But in the meantime, all I'm saying is that we need to recreate our society. Now I want to get back to my Constitution, because in the Constitution, we the people are understood to be free and sovereign. And what does the word sovereign mean again? Y'all remember? The authority to rule. See, the king isn't sovereign anymore. We kicked his butt out. But government isn't sovereign either. Government is subordinate and accountable. Government is subordinate to whom? The people. Government is accountable to whom? The people. That's got a ring to it, right? We the people are free and sovereign because we the people have rights. Government does not have rights. Government only has duties. I'm going to stop for a moment and say the difference between rights and duties is profound. If I have the right to do something, it means I can do it. And I don't need anybody's permission. I don't need your permission. I don't need the City Council of Muskegon's permission. I don't need the Michigan State Legislature's permission. I mean, thank goodness with your crazy-ass legislature these days. But the point is, I don't need governmental or political permission to exercise my rights. In fact, if government tries to infringe my exercise of my rights, they're wrong, not me, and I ought to be able to go into court and argue to overturn any law that infringes upon my rights. See how important rights are? And get this, government never has rights over the people. Government only has duties to the people. And where do those duties come from? Well, remember that all power resides with the people. The people have all the power. In fact, pop quiz, what's the population, more or less, of Muskegon, Michigan?
About 25,000.
About 25,000. So I will celebrate that 25,000 folks have all the political power in Muskegon, Michigan. But I'll tell you this, I don't want to go to a meeting of 25,000 people where we figure out where stop signs ought to go. And I like political meetings. I'm not going to that one. Can you imagine? Now, how many people in the state of Michigan?
10 million.
About 10 million, right? Can you imagine go to a meeting of 10 million people trying to figure out state policy? Look, all I'm getting at is the people do hold all the political power, but in our system of government, we're supposed to, and I say wisely, delegate a certain amount of our power to government. But do we delegate all our power to government? Hell no, we only delegate enough power for government to perform the duties that we have told them to perform. And how does government perform those duties? They write laws, in the public interest, and they write laws to reflect the public policy. And you know what? There's going to be a difference of opinion about what public law should be, and that's okay. We should learn to accept that there are differences of opinion, and I do think that we've lost something in this country by not having the ability to engage in rigorous public disagreement and discourse. I mean, there's something that we've lost. I mean, Dr. Jackson, you're old enough to remember, and as a participant, engaging in real fierce political discussion and still being agreeable to the person that you were engaged in that discussion with. Am I right?
Right.
Absolutely. This is the point. We lost something by not actually engaging in political grappling together. And so here's the point I'm making here, that yes, there's going to be disagreements around public policy, and I'll try to be agreeable even when I disagree, but I also want to be clear, the one thing that no public law can ever legitimately do is to violate the private rights of the people who live there. Remember, we have sovereign rights. Those rights are not subject to the political process. And now that I've taken the time to write this all out, let me in one sentence share with you how our U.S. constitutional framework is supposed to operate. In the United States Constitution, we the people are free and sovereign because we hold all the political power. But we wisely delegate a certain amount of our power to government. Government which we will hold subordinate and accountable. We will sign government with the duty to write laws in the public interest, local, state, or federal laws. But the one thing that no public law can ever do is to violate the private rights of the free and sovereign people who live there. Ta-da! Isn't that brilliant, actually, what I've just described? Isn't that beautiful? We should try that in this country.
Right.
This would totally work. And I want to be clear, this is a beautiful framework, and I also want to be clear, we've never tried it. Because before I go 1 second further waxing poetic about the brilliance and beauty of the U.S. Constitution, now I need another time out. Somebody tell me what year this document gets ratified. What year does the Constitution become the supreme law of the land? 1787 is the Constitutional Convention, but it's ratified. The document is ratified in 1789. The reason I want 1789 on the board is to ask this question. Now that we know that legal personhood means the ability to assert rights, who gets to actually be part of we the people in 1789? What are their characteristics? They're white, and they're wealthy, and they're men. That's a lot of restrictions. I can't help but to notice that you're not in those categories. You were not a legal person, or people like you were not a legal person. In fact, for all the beautiful rhetoric of this, let's just acknowledge something. The problem isn't in this framework as I've just described it. The problem is in who gets to be a legal person to begin with. Let's just be clear. The American Revolution did not stop the destruction and the genocide of the people who actually lived here. It continued it. The enslavement of Africans didn't stop. It continued and was codified in the Constitution. The oppression against women did not stop. It continued. The point I'm making, friends, is that the Constitution, on the one hand, was an opportunity, and on another hand, it was a dream deferred in every conceivable fashion. You know what percentage of the adult humans living in 1789 in this newly formed government, you know what percentage of them could actually claim to be persons? What percentage do you think? Seriously. 10%? 1%. The 1% meme is, that's a good one. We are the 99%. That's good. But don't be so cynical. It's not 1%. It's 5%. For real, y'all.
It was pretty high.
5%. Which means, of course, 95% of the human beings were not legal persons. Which means that this system from jump was based on exploitation and oppression. It was fundamentally racist, sexist, and class oppressive from the beginning. I like how Howard Zinn said it, may the goddess rest his soul. Howard Zinn said, the entire history of the United States has been a history of actual human beings struggling and working and fighting to be recognized as people with rights under this Constitution. See, nobody got given any rights. People fought for them. People struggled for them. People demanded that their humanity be recognized. That's actually what we need to understand today. We're going to have to fight for and struggle for and demand the kind of changes that we know. Because you can't just make a good, compelling case. You've got to organize to exercise for real power. That's the history of this country. Now that we've taken the moment to really delegate this, we have to ask ourselves, well, where should a corporation go? After all, it's the most dominant institution on planet Earth. Well, before I put the word corporation on the board, I want to ask this question. Honestly, does anybody know what it takes to form a corporation in Michigan today? Yes, sir. What does it take?
Just go ahead and fill out a form, send some money to the state, and you're in, and you can do it in a matter of minutes.
It's a matter of minutes, and it's a fairly trivial paperwork, isn't it?
Yes.
And the filing fee, I think, here is $120. Is that?
Something like that. I think it might even be less than that.
Might even be less than that. The point is, it's really quite easy. And you know what? As long as you fill the paperwork out correctly, you know what the Secretary of State will do? Rubber stamp that and issue you what? A charter. And that's the birth certificate of your corporation. You know what you can do with a corporation according to Michigan law today? Check this out. Anything legally permissible. Now, apparently, if you have enough money and power, you can do illegal things in Michigan. But the point is that we haven't even been taught, we don't even think about what the corporation is today, right? We haven't been taught to think about it that way, right? Which is to say, in our education system, they're not preparing us to be sovereign citizens. They're not teaching us the things that really matter in this country. All I'm getting at is that today, the creation of the corporation is like that. Oh, and you can do anything legally permissible with it. How long can your corporation last today? Forever. Longer than any human being will ever live, right? Now I want to take you back to 1789 and tell you what it once took to form a corporation in every state of the Union. And this was true for about 100 years. First, your application didn't go to a trivial clerk. Your application went to the State House of Representatives, where they debated it and voted on it, and you had to get a majority vote. That's not enough, though, because now it goes to the State Senate, where they debated and voted on it, and you got to get another majority vote. But that's still not enough, because now it goes to the governor, who has to be willing to sign it. Does that sound anything like a corporate charter today? Of course not. What did I just describe? A law. The point I'm making, ma'am, is the act of incorporation was once so politically important that it was the functional equivalent of a law. And if you were granted the privilege, not the right, but the privilege of incorporation, it was only good typically for 3, 5, 7 years, at which point the limited liability evaporated. And if you wanted to continue to, the business could continue, but limited liability, you had to go back and apply again. Right? So it was limited in time. Oh, and guess what? If you ever did anything other than the specific thing that you had asked for your limited liability incorporation, if you did any other type of business, you know what happened to your corporate charter? Revoked. Corporate charters were revoked for going ultra vires. In Latin, it means beyond the authority, because there was only a certain authority by which you had been granted this privilege. Oh, and by the way, even if you were acting in the limited time period, even if you were doing the narrow thing for which you had been granted your corporate charter, if you ever did anything to violate the public trust, do you know what happened to your corporate charter? Revoked. Corporate charters were once routinely revoked for merely acting outside the public interest. So that brings me to this pop quiz question. Can anybody name a single one of the Fortune 500 corporations that could even exist today with those political restrictions? I can wait.
All day?
The answer is none of it, right? Again, I'm not against corporations, right? This is a corporation where we are. I know, Paul, your business, I bet you it operates as a corporation. I've dined in his establishment. It's a fine place to eat. I would recommend that you go there. There's nothing wrong with it, right? The point is not that corporation or limited liability is bad. The point is it's a political thing to decide whether to grant limited liability or not, right? Now, I want to be clear about something. What I'm saying is in 1789, the instrument known as a corporation was politically controlled. Let's be clear about this. I'm not saying that this was the land of milk and honey. We already covered this. In 1789, slavery existed. The indigenous were being hunted down and slaughtered. Women were being systematically oppressed. But the corporation as an instrument was properly contained. See the difference? It's really important to recognize that. We can critique the history of racism, sexism, and classism, but recognized that something that the founders did do that they got right, which was to politically control this instrument known as the corporation. Which is why I sometimes wish these people who claim to be such strict interpretationists, who were like fetishists about what the founders' original intent was, well, how about this? The founders' original intent was that a corporation could only be allowed to exist under very controlled circumstances if they were serving the public interest, and they constantly had to get their charters checked over and over again through the political process. How about that original intent? See my point? So now that we understand that it takes an action of state government to create that corporate charter, we understand that the corporate charter can be used to hold the corporation subordinate and accountable. We understand that the corporate charter describes the duties of what a corporation can or cannot do. We understand that the corporate charter should only be allowed to exist if it serves the public interest. Isn't it obvious that a corporation should be here, politically? And so now, my friends, I thank you for your patience, because here comes the punchline of it all. When the U.S. Supreme Court comes waltzing in, and in an act of supreme judicial activism, says, what, ma'am?
Corporations are people.
Corporation is a person. They move it to this side of the line. And if a corporation is a person with rights, it perverts this whole framework. See, corporate personhood is a shorthand for the legal idea created by the courts, totally illegitimately, that says a corporation must be treated as if it's a person with constitutional rights. And if that is true, it means that corporate lawyers can go into court and try to overturn environmental protection laws, which they do successfully. It means corporate lawyers can go into court and overturn public health laws, which they do successfully. If corporations are persons with constitutional rights, it means that environmental protection laws, worker safety laws, every type of law that we work to get passed is subject to being overturned. And what's even worse is that nowadays you can't even get legislators to do things because they're afraid of being sued and having to pay the lawyer fees for doing the right thing. In a nutshell, my friends, corporations having constitutional rights or corporate personhood steals our sacred right to self-government. And what pisses me off as a lawyer, they use the legal system to legalize the theft and tell us that, well, that's just the way it is. It's just the rule of law, and there's nothing you can do about it. Commercial break. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready. See, I could run this country. The thing is, our sacred right to govern ourselves have been stolen from us. They're using the legal system to steal our right to self-government, and I'm here to tell you, we don't have to put up with it. We can do what other people have done before us. We can do what other people have done before us and build a movement. We can build a movement that says that we, the people, are supposed to be ruling in this country. We can build a movement that actually says we're going to commit ourselves to peace, justice, democracy, and ecology. And even more, for the first time in the history of the United States of America, we're going to build a multiracial movement where we understand that black and brown and white people are sisters and brothers, and that we are in it together and we're in it to win. What do y'all think?
Yeah.
All right. Right? We can do this. We can do this. We can do this. And that's why I am going to ask you tonight, if you like what you're hearing, to join me in a movement. Not an organization, but to join me in a movement. That movement is called Move to Amend. Amend what? To amend the United States Constitution. To make it clear that only human beings have constitutional rights, not corporations or any other artificial entity. And that money is not speech, it is property, and we can regulate campaign financing in this country. And I want to be clear to you, I'm going to pass this around and invite you to join. And if you don't want to join, you don't have to, just pass it. I won't be offended. I mean, I think I'll be surprised, but I won't be offended. But what I will say is this: if you are going to sign up and join, I have one request. Please print legibly. I mean, is there anybody who would self-identify themselves as an organizer in this crowd? I mean, I think of myself as an organizer. Anybody else? Is there anything more frustrating than not being able to read and contact somebody? So here's the thing. If you want to join, sign up. If you don't, just pass it. I totally mean that. So as those come around, I'm also going to give y'all some of our information about who we are and what we're about. The second thing I want to let you know is that this movement called Move to Amend, we didn't even exist before 2010. In 2009, 12 of us got together to ask ourselves, should we try this? Today, watch this. We got started in 2010. Today, there are 308,000 participants and growing. We have 160 local chapters and growing. We have helped to pass 500 resolutions in support of our efforts. That number's going up. We have put it on the ballot 28 times, letting people actually vote on this. Every single time we've done it, we've won, including in conservative areas. So, as I come to the conclusion, and then we'll open it up for some discussion, as I come to the conclusion, I want to remind you that I challenged you to challenge me. Is this a story that only progressives and liberals could hear? Or is this a story that we can learn to tell in pool halls and bowling alleys across this country? Is this a story we can learn to tell in factories and farms, and we can find a way to make common ground with people to actually build a movement? Because I'll tell you, friends, I have given this presentation at Occupy encampments, and I got cheers, I got applause, I got laughs. And you know what? I've given this presentation at Tea Party groups, and you know what? I got cheers, I got applause, I got laughs. Now, I want to be clear, the cheers, laughs, and applause came at totally different places. But you can make common ground. Now, I want to be clear. There are some members of the Tea Party that are fundamentally racist, xenophobes, and I admit that. But I'll tell you, I think that they are actually a minority. I think they're loud, but I think they're a minority. Just like in Occupy, there is a loud minority that just wants to burn it down. You know it's right, Dylan?
That's right.
Yeah, it's true. And now, but it's a minority, isn't it?
Yeah.
They just are loud, right? All I'm saying is this: we need to build a movement across racial identities. We need to build a movement across issues. We got to grapple together. And at the end of the day, I'm inviting us to try to tell a story that makes sense to ordinary people and build this movement. So at this point, I want to thank the museum, the People's Museum, for allowing us into this space. Give a round of applause again for inviting us into this space. I want to thank Occupy for helping to organize this, and the March Against Monsanto, I think, is the other group that helped to put this together. So I want to thank you. And now, at this point, I want to invite you to make a comment, ask a question. Just open it up. We'll take a stack. I saw number 1. Remember your number. Number 2. Sir, in the back, you're number 3. Dr. Jackson, you'll be number 4. Number 5. Roger. Anybody else?
I have.
Number 6. Okay. Before we do that, you know what? If this was Texas, there wouldn't be a man without a hat on his head. What's wrong with you people? There's a hat. Can I borrow that hat, sir? So I told y'all my grandfather was a Baptist preacher. Could you tell? Yeah. So here's the thing. Some of y'all might know what I'm going to do with this hat. I'm going to literally pass this hat around. And I'm going to ask if you're willing to put some money in it. But in the spirit of my grandfather, the Baptist preacher, friends, this is called a free will gift. Like, I gave you a gift of this information, didn't charge you anything. And if you are moved to make a gift in return, it would be appreciated. Now, I want to be clear, please don't leave just because a little hat's coming around, right? If you don't want to put any money on it, don't. But if you are going to put some money in, I hope you'll be generous. Because, you know, I was once a successful trial lawyer. Today, I literally make about 10% of the money that I used to make as a lawyer. I don't say that so you'll feel sorry for me. Don't feel sorry for me. I'm 10 times happier. I tell you that so you'll put some damn money in the hat. And if you're going to write a check, write the check to move to Ammend. And if you don't have your checkbook, if you want to make a donation online or use your credit card, go to the website and we'll be able to do it. So if you want to make a donation, great. If you don't want to, just pass it around. And now let's finally get started with question number 1. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it wasn't really a question.
Or a comment. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. By the way, thanks for being here. Yep. And I just wanted to, you know, I mean, you're really good about, you know, not pigeonholing people or groups of people, but I just wanted to make the statement here that our local Occupy group has a real strong supporting member who also identifies with the Tea Party. Now, we don't share, and you would think it would be odd if we did share every opinion, you know, on every issue, but we do share enough to work together, and I'm telling you, this guy is like one of the strongest members in the group, and has been for way over a year. attends the things that we attend, and so, anyway, the Tea Party people aren't all bad. Now, I've attended some of their meetings, and I do know what you're talking about. You start talking about some racist and religious stuff like that, it gets pretty uncomfortable. But they ain't all that way. Thanks a lot.
Well, you're welcome. Let me just say this. Like, if you only work and build with people who agree with everything you say, you are going to be a very lonely organizer. Because let me tell you something. You know what? I don't agree with myself all the time. Right? So I agree with you. We got to actually get in it with people and actually work with them. So I appreciate how you said that. Who's number 2? Yes, sir.
If you go ahead and open this up to amend the Constitution, doesn't this open this up so they can amend whatever they want to amend? Or does it just limit it to this particular item?
It's a fair question. Let's be clear. There are 2 ways to amend the Constitution. One is through a congressional proposal. The second way is through a convention, right? And then the convention would open it up. The congressional proposal route is very limited. Right now, there's an amendment called We the People Amendment. It doesn't have any Michigan co-sponsors yet, so that would be some work that y'all could do to actually build that. But that's a way to limit it. But a convention would open it up, but it would also open it up for, I don't know, the right to health care, the right to enough food to eat, the right to education, the right to shelter. So it's a double-edged sword, but all I'm getting at is you're right, it would open it up. But the last thing I want to be clear about is that decision about Congress or a convention is a Y in the road, and that Y in the road, you don't get to it until you travel a lot of political road. In other words, there's a lot to do between now and then. It's a good question that you're asking. The answer is yes, a convention does open it up, but you can do a congressional proposal that keeps it narrow and restricted.
What are you trying to do here then?
We're trying to travel that road. We're saying we're leaving the Y in the road. We're not making a decision yet about convention or congressional proposal. I'll put you on the stack, sir, okay?
I had this conversation before with a couple of guys that wanted to have a constitutional convention, and all I thought is what you're going to do is get none other than big moneyed interests to come into it, and I guarantee you whatever freedoms are left under the Constitution, we're not going to have them if we have a constitutional convention. You can kiss any freedom we have for an individual, you can kiss it goodbye.
Okay, so what I would tell you is this. If I could snap my fingers and have a constitutional convention tomorrow, I would not do it for exactly the reason you just said. But I want to now challenge you with this. What if I told you that I could imagine a scenario where we spent the next 10 years doing deep political education, that we traveled around the country and built a multiracial movement in this country that actually did the kind of basic education around civics and the law that I've been talking about tonight, and we now have literally tens of thousands of people like me spread out across the country doing things like this in every county, in every city, in every village in this country, and that we completely shifted the political cultural framework. Could you imagine now a convention where we actually say, you know what, not only do the corporations not have constitutional rights, but we want to actually guarantee a right to health care as a fundamental human right, and a right to education. And you see what I'm getting at? I'm just saying that that's a possibility. Let's not foreclose it.
I think it'd just be so much more effective to keep it limited to this one item, because once you open that up, I know where it's going. It's like the guy with $100 is going to convince me. If somebody can be bought off, well, the guy with $100 or the $1,000 is going to be a lot more convincing than the guy with a dime.
Fair enough. And what I would tell you is, then the We the People Amendment is the way to do that. So again, we're not foreclosing the other one,
right,
but we are definitely willing to keep it on the table. Just like the 17th Amendment did that changed the direct election of the United States Senate, right? The Senate used to be elected by the state legislature. The only reason the change happened is because they were a few states away from calling for a constitutional convention. And all of a sudden, the Senate saw the light.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So let's not take it off the table.
Point. That's a good point, too.
Number 3. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I enjoy your presentation. But,
yeah, I knew there was a butt coming there, sir.
But you understand, too, slavery and how slavery done
the people of Africa, you said, Pan-Africans.
Absolutely.
We're not minorities, Pan-Africans, okay?
I understand.
And the slavery was about capitalism. It was not about Africans inferior.
Absolutely.
And they took their culture, they took their names, their language, their religion, took everything. They created a Negro.
Yes,
They
sir.
control the mind. You control the mind, you control the body.
Yes, sir.
So that's the worst kind. And right today, we still talk about white supremacy. I don't believe white folks are supreme. But I'm just as supreme as they are. I mean, they're no more supreme than I am. But you got blacks talking about white supremacy, white supreme. Why do you say that?
Well, I would.
It's come from slavery, and it's still going on. And multinational corporations are oppressing blacks as well as whites, because they cut costs to increase profit by going to Mexico for cheap labor.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And the union is just as greedy as the capitalists, because they are opportunists, you know, because they want more money. And how can they compete with global competition? So sometimes the corporation have to leave in order to make a profit, or they'll fold up. And you spoke about poverty, okay, in the urban community or whatever community. When you got women having babies and not married, don't have a job, don't have a house, don't have food, and depend on the government to take care of them, that's stupidity. And the government perpetuates that stupidity by giving them food stamps, subsidies of housing. But in other countries, there are strong countries, such as Saudi Arabia and some African countries, they don't allow that to happen. They don't give you, they don't celebrate with showers and food stamps for girls having babies, because you cannot develop these kids without the father and the mother together. So a real strong leader understands that. But liberalism has really hurt this country.
Okay. No, I appreciate you sharing your opinion, sir. You know, I'm not sure, because you said a lot. We got a stack, so to go through the stack, and I'll come to you at the end of this, so we'll respect the process. Is that fair? So what I would tell you is this. The reason I use the word white supremacy is because it recognizes that there, of course, human being, that no skin color is more supreme than another. But what it recognizes is the cultural reality where the law and society is exploiting people of color and creating legal systems that are definitely more oppressive to people of color than they are to white people. I mean, that's what I observe, and I'm trying to name it and trying to say that this privilege that is given to white people under society and under law is it's unfair, it's not earned, and it needs to be uprooted. So that's just how I talk about it. And if I gave you in any way the impression that I thought that white people were supreme with the use of white supremacy, then I've made a mistake. I haven't communicated effectively, for which I will apologize. Just as simple as that. And
Okay, another thing too.
we have a stack, so if you, go ahead. One more point, and then we'll...
Right. Other countries who understand their culture
Yes.
is very important. They don't go and ask people for jobs. They create their own jobs.
Right?
The people in India, the religion called the Sikh, their two major principles are collective economics and respect for all religions. They got all kind of convenience stores, gas stations, hotels. The Chinese never march and beg white folks can eat in a restaurant. They would never dare to send their women and children to get knocked down with billy clubs to eat at some white folks' restaurant. Never. Chinese build their own restaurants.
Okay.
I mean, everybody but the blacks has really felt so inferior that they need whites. You need to be integrated to feel whole. Until blacks start believing themselves, respecting themselves, loving themselves, we'll be still calling our doors. And until that change, we still have a problem.
Well, I mean, that's a very profound and provocative thing you've said, and I guess my only quick reaction to that is going to be this, that I try to conduct myself with integrity with authenticity and honesty. And, you know, it is not my place to tell black folks what they should be doing within their communities. However, I come before you and will tell you that any person who steps to me with integrity and honesty and authenticity, I'm going to find a way to work with you. Just like that. Number 4.
Okay, now, one, you mentioned that we should be doing these things peacefully.
Yes, sir.
I know you realize the concept that no one gives up power without a fight.
Power concedes nothing without a demand.
That's right. Now, how do you integrate that in your present situation with peace?
Yes. All right, so I want to be clear about this. This is a very provocative question, but I'll tell you, to answer it, I'm going to start with this acknowledgement, that Malcolm X was right when he said, if you want systemic transformational change, it's either the ballot
Or the bullet.
or the bullet. Right? Power does not ever just give up. Power will never say, oh gosh, white people, black people, and brown people finally got together. I guess they win. Right? So what I'm telling you, and I'm not being sycophantic with you, sir, because of your own history with the Freedom Party, but I'm here to tell you that the only way we're actually going to get power is to take it. And we have to take it at the ballot box. And that means that we actually have to have people who think like we do, who act like we do, who are committed to the principles and values that we do. We need to run them for office at the local level, at the county level, at the state level, at the presidential level. We need an entirely independent political force that is actually committed, and sir, I'm going to say it again, an anti-capitalist framework, an economic system that's actually understanding you can do commerce, but we're not corporate capitalism. Oh no, there's a difference. We're going to actually do real, genuine movement building, and that we're going to do it across this country, and we're going to do it across the state of Michigan. I think when I say that I want to be a nonviolent revolutionary, I want to be part of 1 million strong that are actually engaged day in and day out. And that means not just elections. It also means being willing to be disruptive. It means the sit-down strike. It means being willing to stop the system that is actually exploiting and oppressing. It means being willing to put your body on the line for the Keystone Pipeline or the Enbridge Pipeline, like my brother Chris Wimoff and other people from Michigan Cats did. It means being willing to do whatever it takes to stop exploitation and oppression. So direct action, elections, media. Again, look, I want to stop for a moment and say the only reason that you're hearing this right now, if you're not here with us in this awesome museum, is because the cat behind the camera is named Dylan. I want to give him a name. Let you know that you're watching this because Dylan decided that he was tired of just hating the corporate media, but he became the people's media. And he's starting to create a way for us to actually talk to each other. So when I say I'm a revolutionary, I'm not joking. And I'm also not joking that I'm committed to nonviolence.
Okay, I have one other question.
Yes, sir.
All right. Some of us feel that when you talk about a revolution, that if racism is either not on its way to get finished in this country, that if we go into a new system, that we drag into that system the same racist type of thing, because racism in this country is more than just color.
Oh, yes.
It gives a group of people an advantage over other group of people. That's why it's so hard to pick at it and talk about it, because most of us have advantage in being white. It ain't just because of our mamas and papas are white. It's because our pocketbooks are white. It's because the streets we walk on are white and everything. And unless this struggle is on its way, regardless of what kind of revolution comes forward, we as people of color, and that not only means black color, there's other folks are getting it, but they don't want to admit it, that things will not be taken care of. See, I believe we can't do this in this country without a fight. I hope you're right, because I don't mind being wrong. See there, but at the moment, in my involvement in the civil rights, and my beyond that, still, I feel that to what degree and how long are we, as people going to color, going to wait for to work on change, and the change never comes? There's going to be a generation that's going to appear like this little boy, or maybe beyond, who said, we're going to fight it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do this, then it's a sad thing, but really, if you're interested in power, you don't keep letting someone hang you by the rope and you say, I'm either going to choke to death or I'm going to hang him.
Well, let me tell you something. I appreciate what you're saying, Doctor, and I guess I would say it this way. I consider myself a nonviolent revolutionary, to be sure. I believe in nonviolence, but I'm not a pacifist. There's a difference.
Well, how do you make that difference?
Here's the difference. A pacifist would accept violence against herself or himself and others and just tolerate it out of some commitment to moral and ethics. Somebody who believes in nonviolence would actually say, I believe in self-defense. So I would defend myself or others. And that rope analogy that you use, you damn right there needs to be self-defense. And the Black Panthers is actually a perfect example where they were not only feeding hungry children, they were not only having the programs to put shoes on children's feet, they also operated a self-defense apparatus, right? So I believe in self-defense, but I don't believe in affirmatively using violence as an initial political provocation. That's what I'm saying. You see the difference?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a deep question you've asked, but I wanted to answer it honestly.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, folks, I am a nonviolent revolutionary, but I'm no pacifist. And if you don't believe me, take a swing at me. That's all I'm saying. Actually, please don't take a swing at me. I don't want to have to prove that.
It's our right.
Who's number 5?
Right here.
Yes, sir. Roger.
I'm concerned, what are the actual prospects of getting a constitutional amendment passed at this time? I've heard a lot of talk about it, and yet nothing seems to happen. What, in your opinion?
Well, when you say nothing seems to happen, I mean, I'm not trying to be a smartass here. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to be flip. These numbers reflect a movement that's growing. So my honest assessment is we're about 10 years out from I feel it's going to take about 10 years. See, movements don't just happen. They have to be cultivated. People have to be educated. People have to develop trainings and processes. They have to trust each other. This takes time. So let me do this. Let me finish the stack, and then I see a couple of hands. So we'll do that. So that, yes, I believe. Look, I want to be clear. I don't do this work to make myself feel good. I already feel good. I'm doing this work because I actually believe that we can win. I'm in it to win it. I mean, like, again, I'm committed, and I believe that we will amend the United States Constitution. Who's number 7?
I was 6.
6. I'm sorry, 6.
Oh, it's my turn?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, it's been so much conversation, I think I forgot my original question. But one quick question due
Yes.
to the lateness of the hour. The concept of human rights.
Yes.
It's a conversation I've been having with people for a long time, and trying to get people to understand the distinction between civil rights and human rights.
Mm-hmm.
They were something that, civil rights was something they talked about giving, that they never gave.
Right.
But what should have been granted, obviously, under the United States Constitution, is human rights.
Exactly.
So I am glad to hear that there's a movement and that it's growing.
It is growing.
And it started from probably my concept of the issue, small conversations, there's people, and going beyond that. But I know my question. Move to amend.org.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it incorporated?
It is.
All right.
See? Corporations can do good things too. And here's the point. I do want to come back. This idea of human rights, it actually comes out of a philosophical framework that is actually, I mean, I first came into it, I just want to honor it, from a gentleman named Jamu Baraka, who helped to create the U.S. Human Rights Network, where he was trying and continues to do work to say we have to create a legal system based on a human rights framework in the United States of America. We've never had that. See, this is how confused we are about our own history. And this is part of what I'm getting at. Like, look, nobody, you may not agree 100% with what I'm saying right now. I respect that. But the fact that you're here and we've been at it for about an hour and a half engaged in a deep conversation like that, that's a good thing. I mean, think about it. I mean, look around. Look to your left and look around. Like, just look at one another for just one moment, and let me just say, you're all freaks. I mean, think about it. The fact that you're here, being willing to engage a conversation like this, you're not what normal folks are doing right now. Most folks are watching TV. Right? Yeah. Most folks are fantasizing about buying useless, trivial trinkets and stuff. The point I'm getting at is movements get started because people get together and grapple with these questions. They listen to each other. They struggle over ideas. That's what it takes to do this work. And at the end of the day, what I'm asking is this. I hope that I can convince either Dylan or somebody else in this group to help to form a local Move to Amend in Muskegon, Michigan. Let me ask, is there anybody who's like willing to say right now, you know what, yeah, we need a Move to Amend effort here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
A couple of hands go
Yes.
up. So, like, at the end of this, let's get together real quick, and I want to make sure that we actually create that framework, okay? So, hold on, y'all. No more hands go up because we want to finish. Who's number 7? Did I have a 7? You're going to be first when I start new one. I see your hand, sir. So if you would like to make a comment or ask a question, let's do it again. Raise your hand. We're going to start with the people who haven't started yet. Sir, give me number 1. Number 2. This young man will be number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. And then we'll go back. Sir, you'll be number 6, and you'll be number 7 to close it out. So we're going to be quick this time. So be quick with your comments or questions, and I'll be quick with my response because the hour is getting late. Who's number 1?
Now my question is, like, I just got here, like, and I heard when we first came in, I heard him talking about food stamps. Like, I don't understand what this is about. I came in late.
Well, let me do it real quick. This is about a movement to amend the Constitution to make it clear that only human beings have constitutional rights and corporations do not.
Right.
With all due respect, you'd have to talk to this gentleman. I didn't talk about food stamps. It wasn't part. I support the food stamp program, actually.
Right, but he doesn't.
I know.
And I support it too.
Yeah, so you'll have to engage him about what his critique is. This conversation wasn't anything about and anything negative about food stamps at all.
And the video will be online.
And the video will be online. You can hear the whole thing.
What is this about?
This is about a democracy movement in the United States, and to be clear that we currently live in a racist, sexist, and class-oppressive country, and that we need to build a movement that takes ourselves seriously to actually change the conditions in which we're all living.
Well, I have another question. Not even about that. Like, what about felonies? We don't have no jobs out here for felonies. I thought they passed a law where they can't ask, about do a background check on felonies now.
I'm from California, sir. I'm just traveling around the country. I don't know that. I don't know. I don't have it. I'm ignorant of that scenario, so I can't speak to it intelligently. I apologize. Who's number 2? Yes, sir. Would you like to say something?
Okay, say something.
You just wanted to raise your hand? Let me tell you something. I'm going to come all the way over here and ask for a high five from you. Can I get one? Because let me tell you something. The kind of child that has the presence and the sense of self to say, oh, what? I want to talk.
Yeah.
You've done a good job, sir. But let me tell you something. Your hands are going to be full. Because that's a very good trait that he has for self-respect. But when he gets about 5, 6, 7, you're not going to like it. But stay with him. Stay with him because that sense of self that he clearly so honestly has right now is going to make that a fine young man. Congratulations. Yeah. Who's number 3? Yes, ma'am.
I want to follow up on Roger's question. You mentioned that you thought you were maybe 10 years down the road from getting this amendment to pass.
Yes.
Regarding corporate personhood. Is that dependent upon the makeup of the Congress in D.C. at the time?
Yes, absolutely. Let me be clear about something, ma'am. I don't believe that the people who are going to pass this amendment are currently in Congress, and the people who are going to vote to ratify it are currently in the state legislature. But they are already born. Some of them may be in this room, because this is the point that I'm making. There you go. This is the point that I'm making, folks. We need to take ourselves seriously and be building a political movement that actually, because you know what? I'm not going to suggest to you that all we have to do is get rid of corporate personhood and everything gets solved. Oh no. We got plenty of work to do, right? And the good news is that there are people with good backs and good minds that are ready to do that work. Right? All we have to do is unleash the potential and the creativity of human beings right now. There are bridges to be built. There are roads to be built. There's food to be produced and distributed. There are children to be educated. There's health care to be provided. My goodness, there's so much work that needs to be done. And you know what really makes me mad is the wealthy elite right now tell us that, oh, there's not money for all the things you need to do. Well, you know what? There's plenty of money. This economy has produced more wealth than any economy has ever produced in the history of the world. The problem is not that there's not money. The problem is it's being accumulated by a few greedheads. You know what my daddy said about money? And because I grew up in poverty in rural Texas, right? And when I say poverty, I mean I grew up in a house without a flush toilet. Now, I want to tell you something. I don't tell you that so you'll feel sorry for me. I do say that, though, because I think it's important. Nobody here would have suspected, I bet, that I grew up in poverty. You know why? Because I'm white. That, my friend, is what I mean by white supremacy and white skin privilege. The fact that I'm a white person and that I've gotten a little education for myself, everybody assumes certain things about me, right? That's because of whiteness. But here's the thing Daddy said about money. You know what? If you pile up money in one place, it stinks like what it really is. But if you spread it around, you can do a whole lot of good with it. Money is a lot like manure that way, isn't it? You pile it up in with one person, it starts to stink. You spread it around, you can do a lot of good with it. Number 4. Yes, sir.
Question for you. There are other movements or efforts underway to amend the Constitution.
Yes,
One
sir.
I think of, for example, Senator Bernie Sanders has one. He's been taking signatures on his website, and there's others as well. How do you deal with the fact that there's several parallel efforts going on simultaneously to do the same thing? Is there any effort underway to combine those into one?
Well, I think that movement, this is how movements work. I mean, too many times there's this idea that everybody has to be in lockstep. I mean, Dr. Jackson talked about the civil rights movement. I think that it's really important to recognize that, you know, you had black nationalists, you had the Nation of Islam, you had the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, you had the Greensboro boys, you had the Greensboro sit-down lunch strike that wasn't actually, here's another interesting thing, wasn't actually associated with anything. They were just a group of people in that community who were trying to figure out how to engage in some way in this growing movement. So what I'm getting at is this. We need to recognize that we should not try to force everybody into lockstep. We should let people engage in what makes sense to them. The second thing I want to say is this. The reason that we have not joined Senator Sanders is because all he wants to do is get money out of elections. With all due respect, if anybody thinks that the only problem in our society is too much money in elections, I don't think that they're paying attention to racism, to capitalism, to any of the other deeper problems. We think we need a deeper movement than just get money out of politics. Yes, we need to get money out of politics and go a lot further as well. So that's the difference. So I can walk on the same path, but at some point, some people are going to say, okay, that's enough. But there are others of us who say, oh no, we got to uproot racism. Oh no, we got to uproot capitalism. Oh no, we got to actually transform our society. So Move to Amend is honest about where we are, that's all. Who's number 5? Yes, sir.
As I've looked at it and I've seen the Occupy and all the other movements that are going on, the Tea Party and everything else, and even some of the bigger movements that are moving and making a growing effort of followers, I see more and more that it's all about the money. It's all about the money of what is controlling. And what is controlling our government and our people and what is happening. And so a lot of times if things are going bad and you want to find out, well, what is causing it, a lot of times it's always been you need to follow the money. What is feeding this and keeping it alive and keeping it going? And if we, the people, want to have control of it, we've got to control the money. At least I feel that that is how it is feeding the government, and who in the government has a say. Usually the person that has a say and makes the changes is controlling the money. And it even works up to even further of how corporations are getting it more involved in our government. And they have the money and are feeding the government. So we end up with, right now, what I see as 4 different classes of people. We have the wealthy class, feeding the political class, and who's paying for most of it is the working class, and then there's the welfare class. And as I've also seen a lot of statistics, I see that we're getting to a tipping point of where the people that are now in voting power and becoming more and more prominent in voting are becoming the welfare class. And that the government is just putting programs into place to keep the welfare class going. And I love the movements. I think they're really great. I really hope they really work. And some of them that are going to cut off the money is the same thing that what we're doing here, move to amend. I've seen another one, which is the fair tax. I see it growing. I see Texas and some states have made that move a long time ago to stop income tax and have only supported their states as sales tax, so that income tax didn't feed corporations or give them certain rights in a state to have certain power over our government and to be given special incentives because they had lobbyists.
Okay.
And so I
just heard comments there, so that's
right.
Totally you're right.
One of the questions is.
All right, well, make your question.
Okay. The question is. I noticed there are several lawyers in the crowd, you being one of them, and that there are people that are educated that know what has been happening with our government. Why hasn't that education got down to more people to know what has caused this, and why wasn't it in our education system? The lawyers are getting educated about it.
Okay, so I will tell it this way. The most important thing that any human child learns is how to walk and how to talk. In our public education system, the first thing they're taught is sit down and shut up. And I think that there's something very powerful to understand there, and that is in the public education system, they say, oh, we're training the next bout of leaders. No, they're not. They're trying to, education today, there are great teachers, and I mean that. I mean, I thank public teachers every day because people become teachers because they want to teach critical thinking. But the system of education is actually being used to train people to be obedient workers and consumers. It's not training people to be sovereign citizens. If you want to see where the training for the next leaders are, you have to actually go to Harvard and Yale and super elite private institutions, because public institutions aren't actually designed to do that.
And you also train them to individualism.
Yes.
It's the start point of capitalism.
There's no doubt about it. Well, you're next, I think. So number 6.
What I want to say is this. I think one of the most erroneous things people who are trying to organize people do in this country, they think money is the problem. Now, we built this museum, we didn't have a lot of money. But we had an idea, and we put that idea into practice, and we built this whole museum. We don't owe a cent. See? And so as long as we see money as our obstacle, we're lost.
Agreed.
And it's the ideas that become the real real part of us. And the hardest thing we always had in the civil rights movement, that people saw force and money being the big thing. And I wish someone could have talked to Rockefeller, but they had very little ideas. They had a lot of money.
Right.
I've had people that were in the same room and talking to David Rockefeller, who was a big banker. Didn't talk about much. Because they put the thing forward in capitalism that you gotta have things to really build something. And you don't build a building with things, you build it with ideas. And if you can get people in the movement to believe that, that's what we have. We hope we got people here.
That's the idea.
Believe in this kind of thing. Dylan believes in that. He goes crazy sometimes. He believes in ideas.
That's right.
And
That's why he's a leader in this movement.
yeah.
So we got 2 more, and then I'll stick around if people want, but I want to respect where we are. Yes, sir.
Yeah. What is important is that we gotta understand who want to give us freedom and justice. You have a whole lot of blacks marching on Washington, asking someone to give them freedom and justice. You know, who's the person? We don't know, and they don't give a reason why they don't give you the freedom and justice. So I think what I believe in, you have to have an opposition of the freedom movement. But you are waiting for someone to give you freedom and justice, then you don't have a movement. You want a caretaker. And the same thing with the food stamps. I totally disagree with food stamps because number one, we got a lot of obese people in Muskegon. They eating too much, you know. And I think if you deal with food stamps, you don't have a people connection, you have a government connection. And there's a lot of countries that don't have food stamps, and they are really connected with each other. If you know an individual that don't have enough food, the whole community should come together and work with that person, build, have gardens, have land to grow, raise cows, pigs, whatever. There's no reason for us to depend on the government.
Okay. Well, thank you.
It's been highly misused, and that's the way to keep the revolution good. As long as you feed them, you won't have to worry about them because they are set. They have no reason, no need to change.
Sir, I'm going to ask you, I don't know why you're making the food stamps.
Struggle.
I agree, and this is not a conversation. With all due respect, you're hijacking and derailing the conversation around. I'm going to refrain from engaging in a food stamps conversation because that's not actually why we gathered here or anything that was part of any of the presentation.
Those are simply the problems of us having a victim mentality. Okay?
That may be your idea.
I still don't understand why people gather here. What is this for? How is this helping? How is it helping people?
Young man, what's your name?
Taylor.
Taylor. I'm Paula.
Okay.
You and I are going to talk in a few minutes.
Okay.
Right. And
Because he doesn't have time to have an individual. I'll give it to
You
you.
can't believe it.
Okay?
thank you for that, Paula, and thank you for being
I'm
here.
the
I
one
understand.
speaking. He doesn't.
And there is
We'll have a connection. Okay?
We will have that conversation. So finish it up, and then we're going to close out. I'll stick around for some one-on-one, but we've been at it for a while. I want to respect the space and respect everybody's time. So, Roger, your last comment or
I
question?
just wanted to say that I really do believe in the concept of state of being a nonviolent revolutionary. You've got to be both. I think that basically the government's all prepared for you if you try to conduct any sort of violence, and they'll smear you as a terrorist and so on. Yes, I do believe in self-defense, but basically there are enough nonviolent techniques. I'm a student to some extent of Professor Gene Sharp's 198 methods of nonviolent political action. Trying to put some information on a website we have by Muskegon about those principles. Basically, violence is not going to work in this situation at all. and there are enough nonviolent means that are effective and psychologically satisfying that we can use, that we can actually win in the end, as long as we don't give up.
Well, let me tell you this. I'm just going to conclude with this. I'm in it to win it, and I'm going to use every tool in the toolbox in order to create the change that we want. And I do agree with you, Roger, that we can't win a violent revolution today because the capacity that the state has... See, the state has always been willing to use violence. It always has. The difference today is the level of technology that is at their disposal. If a leader like me ever called for violent revolution, I would be killed or locked up like that. You can rest assured of it. And if anybody tried to actually take up violent arms in this system, they would be killed or locked up like that. So I believe that as a tactical matter, the ideas, yes, I believe in self-defense, but the tactical ideas of actually building a movement and the ideas and putting ideas out to change the way people think and act is the most important one. The second thing I want to say is I actually don't believe that you can create a peaceful world violently. You know, the ends can't justify the means because the means are the ends in the making. If you want to live in a peaceful society, you got to go about creating a peaceful society. If you want to live in a non-racist society, you got to go about the business of actually building a non-racist organization. Right? If you want to live in a non-exploitive world, you got to go about the business of creating a cooperative, collective sharing world. It's just, you got to build the world that you want to live in starting right now. Again, I want to thank the museum for letting us in here. I want to thank the Ammend group, the Muskegon for being here. Thank you. I'll figure out if you want to continue to talk. And for Dylan and anybody who wants to form a local affiliate, stick around. Let's talk about that too.
I want to say one other thing
very
before
quickly.
we leave. This is part of what this museum is about, to bring you ideas and thoughts that you can't find anyplace else. So you can go home and think about something besides television. And we welcome you here. We're African American orientated. Remember, we're in America, and we welcome you here. This is a museum run by black folks, but we have white folks helping us. And one reason in our philosophy is black folks don't get to run very much in America. You see, we're always running for somebody. And then we want to teach black folk how to take responsibility and to run things. And with the idea, I too can be boss. Because whether you rule it or not, what racism has done to us is that we go in the back room. And we're saying, this museum is saying, come forward. We're a great people. Learn how the greatness is important for you to help building a good America. And you're welcome anytime. And tell your friends about it. We don't want to be isolated.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Dr.